Imagine, if you will, a world untouched by human hands. A world vibrant and teeming with life, yet utterly alien to our own. This was the Earth, some 66 million years ago. The air was thick and warm, heavy with the scent of damp earth and strange exotic blossoms. Vast forests of ancient trees, ferns, and towering cycads stretched across the continents, forming a seemingly endless canopy of green. These primeval jungles were a kingdom of shadows and dappled light, where the chorus of unseen insects formed a constant humming symphony. It was a planet in its prime, a verdant jewel spinning silently through the cosmos, unaware of the dramatic final act that was about to unfold in its long and storied history. Beneath the waves, the oceans were just as alive. Great inland seas, warm and shallow, cut across the land masses that would one day become our modern continents. Here, life flourished in breathtaking abundance. Enormous marine reptiles, the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, glided through the turquoise waters with a powerful grace, their immense bodies casting long shadows on the seabed below. Ammonites, with their beautiful spiraled shells, drifted in vast shoals, their tentacles trailing behind them like silken threads. The coral reefs were intricate cities of color and activity, home to countless species of fish and invertebrates. It was a complex, interconnected web of existence, a world of hunters and hunted, all playing their part in a grand planetary drama. On the land, the scale of life was simply staggering. This was the age of the dinosaurs, and they were the undisputed masters of this world. Herds of colossal herbivores moved like living mountains across the Great Plains, their thunderous footsteps shaking the very ground. They browsed on the high branches of trees that would dwarf any we know today, their long necks reaching for the sunlit leaves. In the dense undergrowth, smaller, more cautious creatures went about their daily lives, ever watchful for the telltale signs of danger. This was a world of giants, a place where nature's creative forces had been allowed to run wild for millions upon millions of years, producing a menagerie of incredible and formidable beings. The planet itself was in a state of dynamic flux. Volcanoes rumbled, periodically spewing ash and lava that enriched the soil and reshaped the landscape. The continents, though closer to their present positions, were still drifting, slowly but inexorably, altering the flow of ocean currents and weather patterns. The climate was generally warmer and more humid than today, with no permanent ice caps at the poles. This global greenhouse created the perfect conditions for the proliferation of both plant and animal life on a truly epic scale. It was a world in perfect, albeit precarious, balance, a magnificent, thriving ecosystem that had been millions of years in the making, and one that was about to face its greatest ever test. Among these magnificent creatures, none was more iconic than the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex. This was the apex predator, the undisputed king of its domain. Standing over 12 meters long and weighing more than 8 tons, it was a marvel of evolutionary engineering. Its massive skull housed powerful jaws lined with teeth the size of bananas, capable of crushing bone with terrifying ease. Yet, for all its power, the T-Rex was not simply a mindless killing machine. It was an integral part of its ecosystem, a keystone species that helped to maintain the health of herbivore populations. Its presence shaped the behavior of every other animal in its territory, a constant looming threat that kept the entire community on high alert. Opposing this formidable hunter were the great plant eaters, the true titans of the Cretaceous. The Triceratops, with its 3 imposing horns and a solid, bony frill protecting its neck, was a walking fortress. These animals moved in herds, their collective strength providing a formidable defense against predators. An adult Triceratops was a dangerous adversary, more than capable of standing its ground against a hungry T-Rex. Elsewhere, herds of hadrosaurs, the so-called duck-billed dinosaurs, communicated with one another using complex calls amplified by hollow crests on their heads. They were the great grazers of the plains, consuming vast quantities of vegetation and converting it into the energy that fueled this vibrant world. The sky, too, was a realm of incredible creatures. The pterosaurs, flying reptiles that were cousins to the dinosaurs, soared on the thermal currents. The largest of them, Quetzalcoatlus, was a true giant of the air, with a wingspan comparable to that of a small aeroplane. It would stalk the plains from above, landing to snatch up smaller animals with its long, toothless beak. In the shadow of these giants, life carried on in its myriad forms. Smaller dinosaurs, like the swift and feathered raptors, hunted in packs, using their intelligence and sickle-shaped claws to bring down prey. And beneath their feet, almost unnoticed, were the mammals, small, shrew-like creatures that scurried through the undergrowth, mostly active at night to avoid the dangers of the day. Each of these animals, from the mightiest Tyrannosaurus to the humblest mammal, had its place. Their lives were interwoven in a complex tapestry of survival. The predators culled the weak and the old, ensuring the strength of the herds. The herbivores shaped the landscape, clearing pathways through the forests and dispersing seeds over vast distances. The scavengers cleaned the land of carcasses, recycling nutrients back into the soil. It was a perfectly functioning system, a world in equilibrium, where every creature played a vital role. For millions of years, this delicate balance had held, a testament to the enduring power and intricate beauty of life on Earth. But that balance was about to be shattered forever. Far beyond the warm, blue skies of the Cretaceous Earth, in the cold, silent darkness of deep space, a journey was nearing its end. For millions of years, a colossal piece of rock and ice had been traveling through the solar system. It was an asteroid, a relic from the birth of our planetary neighborhood, more than 10 kilometers wide, a mountain hurtling through the void. Its orbit, once stable, had been disturbed long ago, sending it on a collision course with our world. Unseen and unheard, it moved with incredible speed, a silent messenger of cosmic destruction, closing the distance to our unsuspecting planet with each passing second. It was a force of nature on a scale that the dinosaurs, for all their might, could never comprehend. As it drew closer to Earth, the asteroid began to feel the tug of our planet's gravity. Its trajectory became a fatal plunge, its speed accelerating to more than 70,000 kilometers per hour. To any observer in space, it would have been a tiny, insignificant speck against the vastness of the cosmos. But this speck carried with it an unimaginable amount of kinetic energy, the power of billions of nuclear bombs combined. It passed the moon, a silent witness to the impending catastrophe. On the sunlit face of the Earth below, life continued its ancient rhythm. The great herds grazed peacefully. The mighty predators stalked their prey. The world was completely unaware that its final moments of peace were ticking away. In the last few minutes of its journey, the asteroid entered Earth's atmosphere. The friction of the air, even at its thinnest outer reaches, was immense. The surface of the rock began to heat up, glowing a brilliant, terrifying white. It became a new and unwelcome star in the daytime sky, a searing point of light brighter than the sun itself. Any creature that happened to look up would have been momentarily blinded by its intensity. This was no gentle meteor shower. It was a singular, cataclysmic event. The air in its path was superheated and compressed into a plasma, a sheath of incandescent fire surrounding the descending mountain of rock. The world below was about to change forever. The point of impact had been determined by the unfeeling laws of celestial mechanics millions of years before. The target was a shallow sea off the coast of what we now call the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The dinosaurs living in that region, perhaps a herd of hadrosaurs wading in the coastal wetlands or a Tyrannosaurus patrolling the shoreline, would have been the first to witness the end. They would have seen the sky tear open, filled with a light of impossible brightness. They would have felt a sudden, intense wave of heat. They had only seconds to register this terrifying spectacle before they and their entire world were vaporized. The moment of impact was an event of almost unimaginable violence. The asteroid struck the shallow sea, and in a fraction of a second, it released its colossal energy. The initial blast was blinding, a flash of light that would have been seen across the entire continent. The asteroid and the rock beneath it were instantly vaporized, creating a crater over 180 kilometers wide and 20 kilometers deep. Trillions of tons of rock, water, and asteroid material were blasted high into the atmosphere and beyond, into space itself. The force of the impact created a shockwave that traveled outwards through the Earth's crust, triggering earthquakes of a magnitude we can barely conceive of, 1,000 times more powerful than any ever recorded by humans. This was only the beginning of the horror. The immense heat generated by the impact created a thermal pulse, a wave of intense infrared radiation that radiated outwards from the crater at the speed of light. For thousands of kilometers in every direction, the world was instantly set ablaze. Forests, plains, and everything on them spontaneously burst into flame. Any animal caught in the open was incinerated where it stood. The air temperature soared to hundreds of degrees Celsius. It was as if the planet had been placed inside a colossal oven. The peaceful green world of the dinosaurs was transformed in a matter of minutes into a global inferno. The impact also displaced an enormous volume of water, creating a tsunami of truly epic proportions. A wave, perhaps hundreds of meters high, raced outwards from the impact site. When this monstrous wall of water struck the nearby coastlines, it swept inland for hundreds of kilometers, scouring the land clean of all life. It carried with it trees, rocks, and the bodies of countless animals, depositing a chaotic layer of debris far from the sea. As the shock waves traveled through the planet, they triggered further tsunamis in oceans all around the globe, pounding coastlines on the other side of the world hours later. The seas, once a cradle of life, had become an agent of immense destruction. But perhaps the most devastating immediate effect was what happened to the material thrown into the sky. The trillions of tons of pulverized rock and debris that were ejected from the crater did not simply vanish. Much of it fell back to Earth. As these tiny particles of rock re-entered the atmosphere all around the world, they heated up due to friction, just as the asteroid had. The sky filled with countless trillions of shooting stars, turning the night and then the day into a terrifying spectacle of light. This celestial fireworks display generated so much heat that it baked the surface of the planet, adding to the raging fires and making survival for any exposed creature utterly impossible. The initial blast, the fires and the tsunamis were just the first devastating chapter of the unfolding catastrophe. In the hours and days that followed the impact, the world descended into a deeper, more prolonged kind of hell. The immense fires that had been ignited by the thermal pulse now raged across the continents. Entire forests, ecosystems that had stood for millions of years, were reduced to charcoal and ash. These continent-sized firestorms produced vast clouds of smoke and soot, which billowed high into the atmosphere, joining the dust and debris already blasted into the sky by the impact itself. The sun, the source of all life and energy on Earth, began to dim. The sky, once a familiar blue, turned a murky, oppressive brown. The sun became a faint, ghostly disk, barely visible through the thick haze. As the soot and dust spread on the high-altitude winds, they formed a thick shroud that enveloped the entire planet. Sunlight could no longer reach the surface. Day turned into a perpetual twilight, a dim, eerie gloom that cast the world in shadow. With the sun's warmth blocked, temperatures on the surface began to plummet. The searing heat of the impact's immediate aftermath gave way to a sudden and severe cold. The world was plunged into an impact winter. The effects on the planet's chemistry were just as severe. The asteroid had struck a region rich in sulfur-bearing rocks. The impact vaporized these rocks, releasing vast quantities of sulfur into the atmosphere. This sulfur combined with water to form tiny droplets of sulfuric acid, creating a planet-wide downpour of acid rain. This toxic rain fell for weeks, perhaps months, poisoning the soil and turning the oceans, lakes and rivers acidic. The delicate chemical balance of the seas was thrown into chaos, proving fatal for many of the tiny planktonic organisms that form the base of the entire marine food web. The very water had become a deadly poison. The world that the dinosaurs had known was gone. In its place was a scarred, burning and freezing planet, choked by darkness and drenched in acid. The air was thick with toxic fumes and fine ash, making it difficult to breathe. The familiar landscapes were unrecognizable, buried under a thick blanket of grey fallout. The vibrant sounds of the Cretaceous, the calls of hadrosaurs, the rustle of life in the undergrowth, were replaced by an unnerving silence, broken only by the whisper of the wind and the crackle of distant dying fires. It was a world turned upside down, a planetary ecosystem pushed far beyond its limits and into a state of total collapse. In this new hostile world, the dinosaurs stood no chance. Their very size, once their greatest advantage, now became their fatal weakness. The colossal herbivores, creatures like Triceratops and the duck-billed hadrosaurs, were the first to suffer. Their food source had vanished overnight. The lush green plants they depended on were gone, either burned to a crisp or withered in the darkness and cold. With nothing to eat, these gentle giants began to starve. Their massive bodies required a constant, huge intake of energy, a supply that the planet could no longer provide. Within weeks, the great herds that had roamed the land for millennia simply ceased to exist. The fall of the herbivores sealed the fate of the great predators. The mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, the apex hunter, now found itself in a world devoid of prey. It could no longer find the large animals it needed to sustain its enormous frame. For a short time, they may have survived by scavenging the millions of carcasses that littered the landscape. But this was a temporary reprieve. Once that grim food source was exhausted, they too began to starve. The king of the dinosaurs, a creature that had been at the pinnacle of the food chain for millions of years, was brought low not by a mightier foe, but by the simple, brutal fact of an empty stomach. The ruling dynasty of lizards had reached its end. It was not just the dinosaurs on land that perished. In the oceans, the catastrophe was just as complete. The giant marine reptiles, the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, were at the top of a food chain that was collapsing from the bottom up. The acidification of the water and the lack of sunlight killed off the plankton. Without plankton, the small fish and ammonites that fed on them died out. And without them, the great marine predators had nothing to eat. They starved in the dark, acidic waters, their immense bodies sinking to the ocean floor, to be buried in the accumulating sediment. The pterosaurs, the masters of the sky, also vanished, their food sources on land and sea gone forever. The scale of the extinction was breathtaking. It is estimated that over 3/4 of all species on Earth were wiped out. This was not a slow, gradual decline. It was a sudden, violent purge. The world's dominant animals, creatures that had successfully adapted and thrived for over 150 million years, were erased from the book of life in a geological blink of an eye. Their reign was over. The age of giants had come to a sudden, brutal and definitive end. The planet fell silent, waiting to see what, if anything, could possibly survive such a profound and total devastation. The months following the impact stretched into years of unrelenting darkness. The thick shroud of soot and dust in the upper atmosphere was incredibly persistent, blocking the sun's life-giving rays from reaching the surface. The world was trapped in a perpetual twilight, a cold and gloomy state that must have seemed endless. Photosynthesis on a global scale had ground to a halt. The few hardy plants that had survived the initial fires now withered and died in the prolonged gloom. The impact winter was in full force, and with no sunlight to warm the land and seas, global temperatures remained low for a very long time. The vibrant, warm greenhouse world of the Cretaceous was a distant memory, replaced by a cold, dark, and desolate planet. This long, dark period was the ultimate test of survival. For any creature to make it through, it needed a specific set of skills. It had to be small, requiring very little food to survive. It helped to be a generalist, able to eat almost anything it could find: seeds, roots, insects, or the decaying remains of the dead world. And crucially, it helped to have a way of sheltering from the harsh conditions, perhaps by burrowing underground or living in crevices. The small, nocturnal mammals that had lived in the shadows of the dinosaurs suddenly found that their way of life was perfectly adapted for this new, grim reality. While the giants starved on the surface, these small creatures endured. They lived in a world of detritus, feeding on the vast reserves of dead organic matter. Fungi, which do not require sunlight, flourished, breaking down the dead trees and animal remains, and in turn providing a food source for insects and other small animals. In the streams and rivers, life that depended on nutrients washed in from the land could persist. Crocodiles and turtles, able to slow their metabolism and survive for long periods without food, managed to cling to existence. It was a world of scavengers and survivors, a ghost ecosystem built upon the ruins of the old one. This period of darkness was not permanent, but it lasted for years, possibly even decades. It was a critical filter in the history of life. It selected for the small, the adaptable, and the resourceful. It reset the evolutionary clock, clearing the slate of the dominant dynasties that had ruled for so long. The silence on the planet's surface was profound. The thunderous footsteps of the dinosaurs were gone forever. The world was holding its breath, waiting for the sky to clear. The long night was a time of immense loss, but it was also, unknowingly, a period of quiet preparation for the dawn of a completely new age. Slowly, painstakingly, the world began to heal. Over many years, the dust and soot in the atmosphere gradually settled back to Earth, forming a thin, dark layer in the geological record that scientists can still see today, the KPG boundary. As the skies cleared, the first rays of sunlight in a generation finally broke through the gloom and touched the surface of the planet. At first, the light was weak and watery, but with each passing month it grew stronger. The sun, a long-forgotten friend, had returned, and with its return, the long impact winter began to recede. The temperatures started to rise, and the ice and frost that had covered much of the land began to melt. The first life to take advantage of this new dawn were the plants. Ferns, whose spores can lie dormant for incredibly long periods, were among the first to sprout. They grew quickly in the ash-enriched soil, their green fronds spreading across the desolate landscape in what is sometimes called a fern spike. These pioneer plants began the vital work of stabilizing the soil and, crucially, restarting the process of photosynthesis. They pumped fresh oxygen into the atmosphere and created the first new layer of vegetation. After the ferns came the flowering plants, their seeds carried by the wind or surviving animals, bringing color and diversity back to the barren world. With the return of plants, the animal survivors could begin to reclaim the world. The small mammals that had weathered the long night in their burrows emerged into a world free of giant predators. For them, it was a world of immense opportunity. With no dinosaurs to hunt them or compete with them for resources, they were free to explore new ecological niches. They began to multiply, diversify, and evolve, growing larger and adapting to different ways of life. These humble, shrew-like creatures were the ancestors of all the mammals that would follow, of horses, of whales, of bats, of primates, and eventually of us. The end of one era was the beginning of another. The story of the end of the Cretaceous is therefore not just a tale of destruction, it is also a profound story of resilience and renewal. It demonstrates the awesome, impartial power of the cosmos and the incredible tenacity of life on our planet. The world was broken, but it was not dead. From the ashes of a global catastrophe, life found a way. It adapted, it evolved, and it began again. And in doing so, it set the stage for the next great chapter in Earth's history, the age of mammals, an age that would, after 66 million more years of slow, patient evolution, eventually give rise to a species capable of looking back and piecing together this epic and awe-inspiring tale.